Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Faking It, a podcast based on the notion that we're all just getting through life, experience by experience, and collectively figuring out what we're doing as we go. Improvisation at its highest degree, faking it till we make it. I'm your host, Liz Hodson, and this week our guest is one of my very dear and best friends, Ava McDonald. She's going to talk to us a little bit about her life, but namely what it's like growing up with a sibling who has special needs. So here we go. Welcome to the show, Ava.
Thank you, Liz.
So could you let us in and maybe tell us, for the people who are listening, what you do in your day-to-day life?
Sure. So currently I am a senior research analyst with a management consulting firm. And what I do there is I primarily work in research. So my job is to research and understand small business owners in Canada and in the States. Understand them in terms of how they buy products and services for their business, what motivates them to buy things like insurance and banking and telecom services, those types of things. So that is what I do for my 9 to 5. And when I'm not in that kind of corporate jargon, I, in my time off, have a comedy troupe with you. And
What?
I know, right? And my big brother, Colin. And
So tell us a little about that. About that.
Okay.
What's their name? What do they do?
So it's, yeah, that's right. Oh my God. It's Grab It Productions. Go grabitproductions.com. So grab it. So what we do is we produce, anywhere from 30-second to 3-minute comedy sketches, parodies. We've done one short film so far, looking to do some more in the future. So the primary focus is to make comedic content, and we upload that through our YouTube channel and make it available to the world. So that's, as I say, that's a something like more of an extracurricular activity that I do outside of work. And it just kind of allows me to keep that, passion for writing and comedy and acting alive while I'm doing something during the day that's, very much a desk job for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's actually kind of cool in the vein of a couple of different people we've had on with just like interest in the arts and stuff like that. Like one of the questions I asked my past guest was like, how do you balance the day-to-day work stuff with actually like your art or what you're doing? So for him, that was Davey Jones who came on. As a guest, he was talking about himself as a musician and also a tool and die maker. So for you or us, I mean, the brand is writing and doing comedy and stuff. So how did that begin? It was with a course that we all kind of found, right?
Right. So I would say a few years ago, anywhere from 4 to 5 years ago.
Yeah, it would have been, yeah.
One of us found out that there were comedy writing courses offered through the Second City Toronto training center. So we were all kind of into that. So we all signed up all at once. We took, I would say, anywhere from 2 to 3 courses together. We went pretty far along with the 3 of us, writing scene work, bringing it into class, running through it, getting edits on it, rewriting. So I thought that was a really awesome process. And then for a while there, your and Colin's schedule got a little bit busier. You guys weren't able to make, the future courses. So I carried on for 1 or 2 classes. And eventually that sort of tapered off. But when that was done, I think that we all got together and just realized that we missed that weekly meeting. We would meet once a week for at least 3 hours and basically have to produce written comedic content and run through it with each other and give each other edits.
Accountability.
Yeah, that's a huge thing.
Huge thing for artists.
I would say, yeah, because otherwise, you just get lazy if you don't have a deadline. I just find that you just don't do what you say you love to do and what you always want to do.
Yeah, the deadline motivates for sure. Or
Yeah.
like, I don't want to look like a pumpkin head walking into class and being like, I don't write anything, but you're paying for it and it's like beyond university. So you're kind of like, yeah, I paid like $300 upwards of dollars. So
Yeah.
I want to show up with something.
Yeah, I think it's a money thing when it comes to the courses.
Adulthood,
I think it's a money thing, and I think it's also, like, as you were talking about, it's kind of a, the way you look in front of your peers. It's also just the fact that if everybody in the class doesn't bring a written piece to run through, there's actually nothing in the end to work on or talk about. And that's why I ended up leaving those courses in the end, because it got to a point where drop off in attendance and no one was actually doing their homework and bringing stuff in. So there was just no real value if people don't bring in content to read. So we, I think, have done, a really good job of,
you say that as if it's like, I'm like, you're wrong.
Yeah, you're like, no, I think we're
we do
terrible at
badly.
it. No, no, I think it's really cool. So, for those of you who don't know, with Grab It, we meet every week. And at the start of every month, the first Monday of every month, we are required to bring in new sketches that we've written or any kind of new comedic content that we could potentially film. And we sit and we do read-throughs. We typically do those in person. So you get that kind of live feedback from, your friends sitting around you. And and then that's what we put in our arsenal to basically produce. And we try to have new content written once a month and new content filmed once a month, and then one piece of content produced, actually launched online. So I think we've gotten to a pretty good flow, a pretty good schedule, and I think that's a huge part about that.
Yeah, it feels good. It feels good too. I think for me, like the writing thing, the accountability was pretty needed, but like I think at that point I'd been probably kicking my own ass in like the part-time to try to do art stuff. So like it was sometimes hard to like show up with the sketch, but I think I usually nailed it. But the thing that I was missing that I found with you guys was like actually enjoying and having fun with fiction, because I got into the documentary stream and I was like, oh, this is so badass. I love it. And like the fiction thing was very like kind of fell on, I was like, it takes way too fucking long to do. And it's like, I got frustrated with it. It was too much money to whatever and all this stuff. And everybody wanted to do it in a big way. And that's fine. It just wasn't my style. And then it ended up being that we made a little parody video when you were in like grade 11 was...
Oh yeah. You're talking about the Obsession video? Yeah, that was just 11? When we were kids. We were
just kids dicking around with the camera. Yeah. And like Colin was involved, your middle brother. And we all had a really great time doing that. And it was just like years and years and years and years before, like since we, ever talked about doing anything like that again. Mm-hmm. I think that every now and again we'd bring it up and laugh about it. But like it became something that was a bit of like this great fond memory for me. And then getting back together with you guys to kind of do like Second City, and it wasn't like I'd kept up with Colin. I'd always sort of kept up with you, and like we made it through those detrimental years of university when people are kind of like becoming different people, and then not that person, and then this, and I think we made it through. We popped our heads out, and we're like, yeah, let's do this course. And I don't think we ever did it to. We never started doing it with the assumption that we would make films again. It was very much like we just wanted to do, So then I'm pretty sure, if my memory serves me correct, but you're much better at memory stuff, if we were just sitting in your apartment and we kind of just said, it might have even just been that you said you had a song that you'd been thinking about doing a parody about. Yeah. And then it was just sort of this whooshing, like there was a contract and there was things, and then all of a sudden we just started Grab It.
I think what happened was I at one point had the idea for turning the Macklemore
thrift
shop into the parody that we eventually made.
You just even Girls. You already had it written too.
It was like just something. It was one of those things where
you had to get it
pops
out
into your head. You can't bloody get it out, and you just need to sit and get the thing on paper, because otherwise you're going to lose it. So that happened, and then I just was like, okay, I'll just go to the people that I know that have sound equipment and film equipment. So I came to you, and I came to Ashley at that time. She had a great mic, and kind of showed you guys. We started working on it. We started filming it, getting costumes together, doing the whole thing, putting the music together. That was another thing. Recording a song.
In the closet.
Was a hole in the closet that was padded so that it would be like a soundproof room. Wow. But yeah, no, that was a really cool experience. And then I think from there, you, Colin, and I just put a ton of hours into it, and we were like, let's just keep doing this, because we got a really great response. I think that video to date is our
highest
video with the highest views. So I think that was kind of the catalyst to be like, let's just keep doing it. And then, as you said, we came up with the contract. So
yeah, so that was, I guess we have like a business, but it's not really a business, but it is a business because we don't really like make money. But I think it's a production company. Yeah,
but we don't
make money.
I would say let's call it a business when we start making have a check, the big dollars.
When there's a check that's written to us, it's a business. Right now, it's a production company of our very own, blood, sweat, and tears. Yeah. And I have a fucking lot of fun doing it with you. What?
And laughter.
And blood. Laughter and blood. And I think also too, Grab It, the actual, which is a theme right now in our lives, actually. We go through lulls, but like the whole the whole idea behind the name. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Okay. So when we were coming up with a name, we knew that we wanted something that could be turned into a soundbite. So our soundbite now that occurs at the end of every film when you see the logo is grab it. And that
which people like come up and say to me.
I've had people come up
and
say
they're just like grab it. And I'm like, whoa.
And I love it. I'm like, oh, I was not expecting that. They nail it.
They do.
Yeah.
But so they really it sticks, and I think it's a very
and we knew that would be we knew that we wanted to have that. We
people
knew
just
that
go grab it. I was
exactly. But the way that it came up was we had a favorite sketch that came from Mad TV. Mo Collins. She's pretending to be Barbara Bush, along with several other astute, famous
Oprah
females. Oprah and maybe other past ladies, maybe
definitely.
the Queen. I don't remember.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, there's a really funny Mad TV sketch where they're doing the vagina monologues. And there's a part where Oprah asks, or whoever's interviewing asks the ladies to describe what you do with your vagina. And, one woman says, caress it.
Yeah.
And another woman says, I care for it.
Whatever, yeah. Like,
and then it gets to Barbara, and she goes, grab it.
We just died.
So that's a long-time favorite sketch of ours, Mad TV.
Yeah.
And
so the Barbara Bush saying grabbing her vagina is not where the theme comes, but...
No.
That's where it was inspired by, but we felt that grab it
had a bigger meaning, that's true.
Which was so grab what's in front of you.
Yeah.
Even if it's a vagina. No,
leave the vagina.
No, the vagina.
No. So the idea is if there's an opportunity out there in front of you, something you've been talking about doing for a long time, which we did with our comedy, it was like, just get out there and grab it. So it was a fun thing, and it was also something that actually had, I would say, meaning to it. So
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome. And it's a lot of fun. I have a great time with you guys. But alas, we will maybe talk about that in another episode, a little more about art and acting and writing and stuff. But for now, let's get into family stuff.
Oh, God.
So, yeah. Oh, God. So I've known Ava going on... Ava, what's the math on that?
Since 2002?
Ugh.
So
this is funny because Dave, who I interviewed last episode, was we were like, oh, that's really creepy. It's been so long.
I think
but you and I have been really 2000
so 13 years,
right? Yeah, so it's a really long time. But so I've pretty much grown up with you in like my high school years onwards. And I know your family very well. Like I said before, I work with your brother Neil on a week-to-week basis. Mm-hmm. So my big question and sort of curiosity here, because I am, for all intents purposes, an outsider. Like I'm very close with you guys, but I'm an outsider. I have always been curious about, and there's things we've talked about, but growing up with a sibling who has special needs, whatever that might mean, because we know that that's a huge spectrum of things. Mm-hmm. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your family and your family dynamic?
Okay. So in terms of the people in my family, so it's my mom, my dad, my two older brothers, and myself. My two older brothers. So Neil is the eldest, and then Colin is in the middle, and then me, I'm the baby. And then in terms of, the dynamic or who we are, I mean, we're all very tall and we're all very loud. We're very loud, expressive,
Irish,
British background. My mom is from Blackburn, Lancashire. My dad's from Dublin, Ireland. I'm sure there's some of those cultural influences in there too.
Maybe just like a fiery Irish and very fair and lovely English.
British woman.
British, yeah.
She's from the north, so she's not that classy. Like, let's not go to...
I don't actually know any... I mean, your mom probably tells me these things, but like, I don't know much about the dichotomy of how things are split up.
Either.
But I think your parents are... awesome, and I love them so dearly. So to me, they're like, oh yeah, I don't know about like where you came from. Does that mean you're anyways, northern
Blackburn, like,
yeah,
sure,
Blackburn.
who God only knows. I
have no idea.
I spew that off because that's exactly where my mom.
You're like,
she's
don't
from.
mistake.
I'm like, I don't really
Your
know
mom's
where that
not.
is on
My
the
mom's
map.
not classy.
My mom's not a classy one. No, she's
but
actually
she's
extremely
totally
classy.
exactly. She's very
my favorite.
classy.
But yeah, so that's my family.
So your older brother is the sibling of yours who has special needs.
Yes, yeah,
And he's in his 30s.
yes, he is 33. Yeah, 33.
Like,
I was like, he's 6 years older than me,
Right.
So yeah, so I had to do a bit of math there, but yeah.
So, and
maybe
can you kind of articulate maybe the issues or the medically or socially that Neil has or had,
Yeah.
now, and then we'll maybe talk about what it was, what those things were like when you were a younger kid.
For sure. So from a medical standpoint, Neil has cerebral palsy and epilepsy. So the cerebral palsy affects him a little bit on his right-hand side. He's very physically capable. Like he's a strong, healthy young guy. He has a little bit of weakness, I would say, maybe on his right side, perhaps in his right leg. But so that's cerebral palsy, and then epilepsy. He does suffer from seizures once in a while. And how that came to be was when he was born, he had a small leak in his brain. So it affected certain parts of his brain. He had a bit of frontal lobe damage. And then from there, these other things developed, but they were able to put in shunts to basically reduce bleeding and that sort of thing. So medically, that's some of the
diagnosis of
Sure, some of the things he deals with. And then, so socially, as I said, he's a very capable individual. He's he's hilarious. He says very funny stuff. He loves to chat, like we all do in the McDonald family. Can't get us to shut up, but so he's a very chatty person, and he's a very lovable person. I don't know. He's my big brother. You know what I always say. It's like he's my biggest brother, but it can be like having a younger brother because. I don't know. I feel like my mom once told me that his IQ was around the 7-year level. So yeah, I mean, it is like talking to somebody who you've always known to be your older brother, but he is young. He's childlike in some ways. He loves Disney, which is great. Like we all should probably be more like that. So,
Totally.
So yeah, that's kind of an idea of
like
who
where
Neil
he falls
is.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Like if we're talking about charts, which can be
right.
odd, because I find something with experience with Neil is very interesting is that like what you're saying is like, okay, sure, on paper, maybe you say he's around this age or whatever.
Right. That's kind of,
But like, I mean, that's how they have to do things in that world, because how else do we actually like, we're all about categories and we're all about like trying to figure out where everybody falls. But Neil's so interesting, I think, for me in that way, because sure, so he'll do things like he'll be talking about something very serious. Mm-hmm. But he'll use moral, like he can say and does often say things very maturely, very whatever is going on, but he will use principles from different things that may be perceived as childish, but they're not really, because there's moral things and stories in like Sesame Street, or there's moral things in Disney. And, where someone might be like, well, I'm quoting the Bible and this is a moral thing that I'm saying. It's like, well, there's this thing from Disney, or there's this thing from Berenstain Bear books that legit though, like he will be like, that's a problem that Berenstain Bears had. And this is, get the book, put it down and be like, this is how they dealt with sibling problems. And you're like, this is a good point. Yeah. I just want to say that's a good point. Yeah. And like, sure, that might be perceived, but like, to me, that's really fucking intelligent. And like, so that's very interesting because you're so right. It is, he's your big brother. He's an adult, but then there's things that aren't adult like, but that they still are intelligent and they still are. So yeah. So Neil is a very layered person, like everybody is. So what was it like growing up with someone like Neil?
I remember us talking about it once. Like you used to ask me, did you know that you were growing up with somebody who had special?
Yeah.
Like,
were you aware of that? Like,
exactly. Yeah. And the answer is yes, because you go to school and you know that other kids don't have a sibling that's mentally challenged.
Right.
But at the same time, it's all you've ever known. So it's just your situation. That's just your family. Mm-hmm. And so what it's like is, I think it's extremely good for kids. I think that growing up with a mentally challenged brother prepared me in ways that I believe other kids might not have been prepared for certain things. So first thing that jumps to mind is you have to learn patience. Because for several reasons.
And you are a very patient person. That is, yeah.
In some cases, I feel like my patience has like waned a little bit as I've gotten older, maybe because I've lived on my own now and I'm out of that environment. But,
sure, yeah.
I think you definitely have to learn patience for several reasons. One is because, Neil can have a short fuse sometimes. As I said, he's had frontal lobe damage. So, sometimes you can get upset pretty easily. But I'd say the bigger thing is patience, in situations like where the person has a seizure. You have to be able to just get down very quickly to a very neutral, calm level, make sure that they're safe, make sure that, the other people around you in the surrounding area, wherever you are, it can happen at any time, that, they're not interfering, that they're safe. So yeah, that patience, that calm is something that I'm sure has come in probably very valuable for me as I've gotten older. It's definitely challenging at times. I mean, there's times that I would have wanted to know, to be frank, I would have wanted to know, like, what would Neil have been like had he not had any mental disabilities. I think about that. I'm
just
very curious to know. There would be, I'm sure, elements of the personality he has now, but there would be some other things too. He's a very fit, strong guy most of the time. So would he have been an athlete? I don't know. Like, it's just, you wonder about those things too.
Yeah. So you said about frontal lobe damage. For people who don't, like, Neil has frontal lobe damage from his cerebral palsy?
You know what? I'm not 100% sure. My guess would be that any trauma that would have come to that area of the brain, whether it could have had something to do with, the leak when he was very young, it certainly would have happened when he was young. I can't tell for sure whether it could have been from seizures, maybe even that he would have when he was very small. Maybe I'm not 100%.
Yeah. So as a base thing, frontal lobe damage contributes to his short fuse that you said with anger?
Yeah, my understanding is that is, a lot of where the personality is based, and it can have an effect on your ability to, I may not be saying this correct because I'm not an expert, but control certain emotions. So, when I think about Neil, as I say, being able to, get upset easily at times, not all the time. He's gotten awesome, a lot better as he's gotten older. When he was young, and I would say going through puberty, holy cow. I mean, for any kid, there's a lot going on there. So there were definitely significant jumps in mood swings and that kind of thing. But now that he's older, getting a lot better, but it definitely, I think, affects your ability, to control your upset.
So when you're saying like mood swings, like maybe to properly articulate like what you would have gone through or seen, like every teenager goes through mood swings, but Neil's were significantly different. How would that have been different between like, oh, I'm going to slam my door and I'm upset with my mom, to what actually, like, what did he behave like? Yeah.
So he could get pretty angry is essentially the idea. He could, he could have, just been verbally not the most pleasant person, sometimes physical. And I know that is not a situation that is unique to my families. I know that is something that many people who have folks in their families who have special needs struggle with. These people, I can imagine on Neil's end and other folks' end, they must get incredibly frustrated, to not feel like you always are in control of some of those emotions and you have to react in a certain way to just almost, I don't know what it is, like let go a certain amount of energy. Like, that's not pleasant because you end up suffering a lot of the consequences of any kind of actions you might have. So I think it can be a difficult scenario for all of the different parties involved. But that's what I'm alluding to when I'm saying, upset or anger. Like, it can be at times verbal, just unpleasant, and, in some cases physical.
Right. So could you express any worries or personal feelings or like an anxiety or something like that you can pinpoint through your childhood? Maybe you feel protective or you feel a certain way towards your sibling, or, anything that you can identify that maybe is unique to your situation where you're growing up with somebody who has special needs.
Yeah, definitely the protective element. I think that was frustrating when I was younger because, for example, there's a scene that pops to mind from when I was young. I was in grade 2. Neil and I were going to the same school at the same time. So when we were out in recess, we would have been out in the same playground. And so Neil would have been in grade 8 at the time. And as I said, when he was younger, going through puberty, like, different chemicals changing, he had his own struggles when he was growing up during that time. But there's one moment that stands out as this kid was teasing Neil, essentially. And like, I was in the playground. This kid was in grade 6, so he was bigger than me. And I was trying to run up to, to see what was going on, because I could just see Neil getting frustrated from these kids saying just stupid shit to him. And I'm like, who are these fucking assholes? This kid runs up behind Neil and pulls down his pants. And just like exposes him to the whole schoolyard. And it sticks in my mind. And long story short, this kid did something pretty terrible and just completely mortified Neil. And, I went over to him and I kind of helped him get himself back together again. And I remember feeling so much anger, and I wanted nothing more but to be bigger and really strong. And to just like, it's one of those moments in your life where you're like, I don't know how, like, if I'll ever feel this angry again, but I could like beat the shit out of somebody. So things like that when you were young and you're like, I'm just small and I'm small and no one listens and I can't,
you feel
this
helpless.
Kid's in grade 6 and I'm not as big as him and I can't do anything to him. And he did something terrible to my brother. Things like that, I think are really hard to see have happen to your sibling, because you hate anybody for doing something like that to somebody who already, like, they didn't get dealt the same cards. Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? So stuff like that, I think, was like a huge point of frustration when I was younger. Now that I'm older and I'm established and I don't know, I'm educated, I have a job, I am very confident in what I do and how I do it, how I speak, how I've been brought up to be me. I feel like Neil can't be touched. Like, one day when he becomes somebody that I have to, oversee and take care of and that kind of thing.
We'll talk about that more as well too in detail.
Right. But I'm just saying there's a very big shift between being a child and being an adult. And I kind of knew at a younger age that would happen. I knew that when I was older, I would have access to more things, and that just wouldn't be a worry anymore. And it is true, because even from, again, going back to that protection point, when I think about when I was younger and Neil would have a seizure or in a public place, or we'd be going out to a mall, I'd be worried. I'd be like, oh my gosh, what if Neil just has a seizure in the middle of the mall? Like, everyone's going to stare and look at him, and like, I don't know what they're going to do. And like,
wow, you would consistently feel that as soon as
I would worry about it. Yeah. I mean, you know what? I don't want to over exaggerate and make it sound
but it's just like a thought. It's a thought that crossed your mind.
It would have been a thought. It would have been something that I would have thought a few times for sure when I was younger. Whereas now that I'm older, like, if that happens in a public place, I don't give a shit who's around. My focus is on him.
Yeah, you're confident.
And like, you know what, buddy, you take a seat, like, you calm down, like, you take your time, you got to go through
Which
this.
you have done many times in very public areas that, people are swarming, and it's like, oh, this is happening right now. So I'm going to be, so it's interesting because you've become big enough, and you've become like to help him when he needs help.
Yeah. But when you're a little kid and you can't, it's really frustrating. But I think, again, it's one of those things it's tough to go through. But when you're older, I do believe it shapes the person you turn into when you're older, because now I know I think a certain way about that whole situation. And I'm happy with how that's turned out. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it can be difficult, obviously, but it shapes all of the different people involved. And you just hope the playground example is a sad one and a bad one, but I mean, many kids have grown up in the playground and had some, lousy things happen to them, and bullying and that kind of thing. So that goes
and I think that protection for our siblings, regardless of whatever their mental or physical abilities or states are, like, I could be frustrated and even feel probably angry enough with my own sister to be like, well, just really angry about the person or not getting along or whatever, to the point of like, just really not getting along. But if somebody friggin' crosses that line, Like
yeah.
you're like, you know, for all intents and purposes, there's not something that I can say like my sister she does not have a physical or mental special need or anything like that or disability. But like if somebody got up in her face, and she maybe wasn't somebody to get up in that person's face and be like angry. Maybe she was more of a passive person. Like if that's, you know, the one thing that you could say was like her in the playground of bullies, she might have not been somebody to be like, well, you know, this, and I'm the person who sees that and ran up, and I have a very similar thing, not being pants, but someone, you know, making fun of how she looks, and me being like, fuck you, and then be like, oh shit,
I will do damage if I can. I'll use whatever little strength I have.
You sound a little bit more stronger than I was, because I started running away from them and promptly had an asthma attack. So, you know, they were on bikes, but like I was like, fuck you, buddy. It would have been like, stand back.
I'm gangly and long, but I can.
I promptly had an asthma attack, but I understand your feeling on a level. That speaks definitely to your personality and like to who you are, and that you are like a fiercely loyal person.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a lot of sense actually, now that you're saying that.
Probably. I mean, I think a lot of people would be with their siblings, but
yeah. So how did like the dynamic, or how did this like having your oldest brother, Neil, the person with special needs, how did that like impact your middle brother, Colin, and your relationship? So did you like, I always often wonder, like in a dynamic like that, there's three of you, so it's an uneven number. Do you like bond quickly or more strongly with Neil, or do you bond stronger with Colin? Like how did that end up like that, those cards fall?
I think I bond with them in different ways. I'm trying to remember back to when I was really young. I'm not 100% sure if I was like as good of buddies with Colin. I think I've always been really close with my brother Colin. But at least definitely now, let's say teenage years into adult years. So I'm 27 now. So with Neil, I mean, what I'll say is with Neil, I talk to Neil every day, because I talk to him every morning on the phone on my way to work, because I talk to my mom, my dad, my brother every day on the way to work. It's just my routine. I call them while I'm walking to work. So talk to Neil every day. We have good conversations. I know what's going on in his life. He knows what's going on in my life. You know, he has some words of advice for me. So, like I have a close relationship with Neil. Colin, I also have a very close relationship with Colin, and it's probably more of a buddy type of relationship, because first of all, we do have our comedy troupe, so I see Colin quite often. I see him at least, let's say, once a month. And you know, because Colin and I can talk about shared interests, like things like comedy or, you know, personal finance. That's sad that's an example, but
it's really not sad. Everybody should read about it.
Yeah, no, it's really cool.
I don't care if you think that I'm a dork for saying that.
Yeah.
Personal finance, figure your shit out.
Read some good books. I have some that I can recommend. But so there are similar common interests between Colin and I that we are able to sit and talk about and joke about. And sometimes Neil will.
Do you think that though, that's because you guys are mainstream people who are sort of the closer in age? Do you think that you guys are closer because you have like, not closer, but I mean like more relatable because of your experiences? Like Neil's experience is completely different than yours. You're both of yours. So do you think that there's a disparity there? Is it just like sort of something you don't really pay attention to? You're like, yeah, this is my relationship with Neil, space. This is my relationship with Colin.
I think also the different language that we use is a contributing factor.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean by that?
So with Neil, so first of all, the content of what he talks about is different. And I do try to, what's the right word? I don't try to sugarcoat anything with him. I try to talk to him about the same shit that I would talk to about anybody else, because he's got to be in the loop. He's got to just, that has to be a part of his life.
Of course, you have to be relevant and up to date on things and stuff. So yeah.
So I try that. And so the language is different. Certain social cues, like for example, Neil and Colin don't always get along. So if Colin and I are, you know, joking back and forth with each other and Neil wants to get in on it, and Colin says some stupid comment to Neil that is kind of a joke, but it's kind of like, you know, a sarcasm or something like that. that Neil doesn't get. Like, it could upset Neil and get him frustrated. So
siblings too, right? Like we just get kind of worked up sometimes.
But then I'm kind of sitting in the middle and I'm like, oh man, I don't want
like,
Neil
hold on,
thinking
brother
that
one,
like,
hold on,
oh
brother.
yeah, I'm hanging out with brother number 2, laughing at everything he says. And I think it's funny when he says something that, makes Neil, look like a schmo or something like that. Like, that's a weird position to be in, because I'm like, Colin, like, we were just laughing, we were having a great time. And then with Neil, it's like, oh, dude, like, you got to lighten up a little bit. It's just a joke. But also, like,
you get how that could hurt him.
To him if you know that.
So do you feel that that's a common thing, that you get caught in between stuff?
I wouldn't think that they think of it directly as me being caught in the.
No, but do you think or feel that way?
Because on the one hand, I'm like, I'm trying to enjoy, whatever thing I was joking about with Colin, but I also don't understand why something has to be said to Neil in a way, or Neil has to say something that kind of makes him be out of it. I don't want that. That's why I think that, what you were alluding to before, where it's kind of like, you have a relationship with Neil, stop. You have a relationship with Colin, stop. I think it is maybe a bit like that, because probably because those two don't get along as well as they could. And then so in that case, I'm like, you know what? It's just easier for me to have my interactions with Neil, my interactions with Colin. Of course, we're a family. We're going to come together. But ideally, I think that's where the more meaningful interactions come out of, when I'm probably talking to Neil or I'm talking to Colin.
Separately.
Okay,
guys, I'm pausing here for a short second. I don't currently have any sponsorship for this podcast, but if I did, this is likely where the shout out to them would go. Faking It promotes a healthy and positive lifestyle. I can see us representing anything from health, alternative lifestyle, travel, and overall personal well-being products. So if you yourself have a small business or work for a big one, or maybe know somebody else who might be interested in placing their ad here, please drop us a message through our email, fakingitpodcast@gmail.com, or on our website, www.fakingitpodcast.com, under the sponsorship tab. I'd love to hear from you. I'm always curious about family dynamics. Like, dynamics, I think, is a very big theme right now in this podcast, when I'm thinking about it, like how people are relating and how people work together. And, any certain family has like, I just get along with dad better. Or like you said, your dynamic with Colin or Neil is, this is the kind of topics we get along with. This is the kind of topics we get along. How do your parents fit in with all of that? Like I said before, they're effing great people, but I mean, like, I don't want to swear because they'll be like, why are you swearing? But Liz, why are you doing that? Your dad will look at me and be like, but I guess from your side of things, your perception, your feeling, your experience, like, how does that all work? Now we're tossing in the parents after you've kind of spoken about your siblings.
Yeah. I mean, when you're talking about the thing of being thrust away, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head in that, at least in the years that I was growing up with my family, Neil didn't have too many severe medical conditions. Now, that said, I'm sure if you talk to my mom when he was first born up until his first year, I mean, different story. They were definitely going for different surgeries, different...
Yeah, but they didn't have any kids at that time. So it was
just Neil at that time.
Right.
So there would have been a lot of that up front, but I would say by the time Colin came along and I came along, generally pretty normal in terms of, visits to the doctor and that kind of thing. So were we thrust away because of stuff like that? No. And were we thrust away at all? No. And the funny thing is that my brother and I, Colin and I, will kid my mom and dad on by saying, oh yeah, like mom, like Neil's totally your favorite. You know what I mean? Like you spend all your time on him.
Your mom probably just goes like, what are you like?
She's like, we're joking. And she gets like, but
that's
gets
a mom
though,
mom, that's like, it goes so much more than skin deep for a mother, I think. Like they'd be like, what? Like,
I've learned that now. I'm like, oh, okay,
maybe don't joke.
Use that joke again. Doesn't go over well. But the reason why I say that is because, like, absolutely not the case. I even know from talking to my mom that I think when her and my dad were younger people and they had Neil and they made the decision to have other siblings, like other kids, so that Neil could have siblings, they made a conscious decision that they were going to, spend as much as possible equal time with all of those kids, all of their kids together. Like they don't do the favoritism where this kid needs
and
more.
Some people don't do it intentionally, but it's interesting to hear that you said that they consciously made a choice to not be like the intentional, like, oh, let's try to let's split time as best as we can.
Yeah. And to give you an example, so, for example, Colin, would have had tons of soccer games, competitions, meets
Lots
to go
of sports,
to
lots of things
when he
like
was
that,
growing
yeah.
up. And like my dad took him to all of that stuff. My mom took him to a bunch of that stuff. We would go to watch his games. And if there was, I wasn't big into sports when I was growing up.
no?
I know. It's so shocking. Oh. But no, I
You
wasn't.
seem like the sportiest.
You seem so sporty.
You seem so sporty. What's up, you
No.
sportster?
Yeah,
Were you
no.
Sporty Spice when you used to play Spice Girls?
I did gymnastics when I was young, and I got first on trampoline. Thank you.
Shit. I don't know that.
Yeah, well, 1 year.
Wow.
But
Not consecutive years. 1 year.
1 year.
Well, that's good though. But yeah, like you all had things going on.
Yeah, and what I would, so the idea is if I didn't have a ton of sports stuff going on, but anything that I would have wanted to tell my parents I would want to do, if it was feasible, I mean, they would help me do it. Or, I'm sure I pulled my mom in a ton of times to help me sit and work on homework. So was there any favoritism? Was there any, oh, well, we don't get as much limelight because our older brother needs care? No,
Right,
that not our family anyway. That didn't happen.
There's something that too, I loved hearing about this. So I'll just ask you about it and see if you remember it. But in my work with Neil, there was like some sort of time where I went through some files or something. Your mom was just sort of like, this is what we have. And like, I don't remember why, but we were just digging for something. Mm-hmm. And there was like this chart that she had that she said she would like motivate you guys to do different things, and you could bank
the
almost
CHIP program.
Do you remember
Yeah.
that? Okay, can you talk a little? I think it's so brilliant. Can you talk a little bit about the CHIP program?
Yeah, it was a long, like I would have been little when they first did it. I might have just been in kindergarten, so maybe I was about 5. Colin would have been around 8, and Neil would have just been early teens. So I think what it was, the idea was to get all 3 kids onto a program where, you would be awarded a certain color chip depending on if you did a chore or if you behaved well, because that was a big thing that we were working on during that time, because Neil was just starting to go through that phase where, he was going to be, I guess, going from elementary school into high school. Things were changing. There were just some behavioral things that he needed to work on. I'm sure as even us as little kids, Colin and I needed to work on so that we could all work well together. So my mom somehow found out about this CHIP program. Essentially you would be awarded a certain color chip, and it was almost like getting money. They would have been like poker chips. So then once you
like a banking system, like sort
exactly. So then once you reached up to, if you had 5 red chips, that could mean that you could go for a trip to the dollar store and get 1 item from the dollar. And that was like that was the ultimate.
I mean, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So
there was like,
awesome.
there
It
seemed
really
to be
worked
like
awesome.
a lot of cool things, or not a lot, but I'm just saying like that was an example of something that maybe they consciously did too.
For all 3 kids.
All 3
That's
kids,
the key thing.
not
It was
just
never
the one.
just for Neil. It was if Neil does it, the other 2 kids do it. So I'm sure there are points in life that you could pick out and say, well, this is an example of a time where I really didn't get equal focus, or my parents were trying to give me my time,
Like
and Neil,
you're right.
had
Everyone.
to insert himself. I'm sure you could pick out those times. I would say overall, I really think looking back, they did a great job in terms of spreading things out evenly. And I think it's a cool point that I haven't thought of before about all 3 kids having such distinct and big personalities. And like, again, going back to we're all loud people, that like, if you need something, or like you want to be heard, or you want to come and, talk about your day at the end of the day, the dinner table's there at the end of every day. We always did a big dinner thing every single day, and we would talk about that kind of stuff. So the opportunity was there. The only times that, maybe, you could think about things being frustrating, I'm thinking of if my mom was in the process of making a costume for me for Halloween, or my mom was in the process of making a costume for me for something to do with drama when we were, going to the drama school at Mayfield in high school. There would be times where if Neil wanted to come up and ask my mom about, oh, Mom, how do you spell something? I want to, type something in to find a certain type of music. Like, how do you spell this thing? And, if she's in the middle of a task and she's like, okay, Neil, well, like, hold on. Like, I just got to sew this thing, or I got to pin this one thing on Ava. And so those situations, would definitely
So maybe my
happen.
question should be reframed about, it's not so much about your parents giving equal attention. It's more so about, is Neil okay with all the attention not being on him? And I think you just said, like, he has a difficult time sometimes with understanding you're doing something right now.
Right.
Because he does want a lot of it.
He does. Oh yeah, especially from my mom in particular. And you know what I think? I think something that you've reminded me of, something that I did notice when I went away to university. That was the first time that I had really spent any real time away from home. We are all big homebodies in the McDonald family household. So literally it wasn't until first year university, I went to Kingston, Ontario to go to Queens, which was a 3-hour drive from where my family lived, obviously lived on campus. And what I found was, and what I still find to this day, now that I live on my own, is when I come back home, if I'm chatting to my mom and dad, or particularly my mom, or I'm trying to do something with my mom, you'll just see Neil, who I've heard will typically just go off and do his own thing during the day. But he will be more present, more inserting himself kind of in the conversation, which is fine, but he doesn't always want to keep with the conversation that you're having with your mom or your dad. He wants to sometimes...
There's a different tangent or a different split off into a different
to what
topic.
He wants to talk about, or he wants to ask something or tell you something.
Or he'll add something in.
And then just go off. And so... But my understanding is he does that more when there's new people around coming into the house and looking for attention from mom and dad than he does just regularly. There is something about
someone else is here.
Someone else is here and they're kind of soaking up some attention. So I'll just be there too. And I'll ask for things or I'll try to talk about things, which is fine. But you have to stay on topic with what the group is talking about. You can't just direct it to what you, Neil, want to talk about. So that is something that does happen, yes.
What are your hopes and wishes for him in his older life?
I think personally, I'm an ambitious person, and I think that translates over to what I want for Neil. I want him to have everything he wants, and I want him to be a successful, independent individual.
What does that mean, though? What does independence mean to you?
Independence to me would be, I would love for Neil to feel like he has even more purpose than he does right now. He volunteers at 2 different locations. He volunteers for Aaron Oak Kids. He volunteers for the Rose Theater. Liz, you know all about that. You were huge. You were the catalyst that made that happen. Thank you. I want Neil to, if possible, have a job or have more volunteer opportunities where he's getting out every day doing what other people have to do. So I want him to feel like he has a strong purpose. In terms of, being independent, I would like him to one day have his own place or have a place where perhaps he has roommates, or even if he lives with my mom and dad, one day my mom and dad won't be around. So I want Neil to have his own home. I want him to be able to go to where he needs to go with ease, whether that means, someone is available to get him there in a car, or he gets more acquainted with using public transportation. I don't want him to feel that there are limits. And I want behind his name for there to be a strong financial backing. And I think that, myself and the other people, like my mom and my dad, are going to be contributors to making sure that happens. I want him to not have to want for anything. That's as I say, like it's
Security.
An ambitious thought to have for someone with special needs, because so often, I mean, with folks with special needs, for example, in Ontario, we have ODSP, where someone with special needs receives money from the government for their living, and they are only allowed to bring in income up to a certain amount before that assistance goes away.
Yeah, so it's almost a catch-22, because in Ontario, you get a certain amount of ODSP depending on what your needs are.
Right.
But then it's barely enough for most people to actually pay a rent,
small amount,
feed themselves, have transportation, and live a life where there's entertainment involved. It's actually not enough. But if a person's to say, thank you for the subsidy, I also have a part-time job where I do this for, 2 hours to 7 hours to 12 hours a week. It works in the way that EI or unemployment funding works, where as soon as that, trips the system that you're gaining some sort of money, you're off of it. But then it's always a catch-22, because usually these guys don't have full-time jobs. It's not like they're working 40 hours a week in an office that's paying them a fair salary. It's unfortunate, and it doesn't happen.
Right.
So you're you're snookered because you go
Exactly.
you're not going to get a 40-hour job. And if you do, it's probably going to be something like, in noble scenarios where you're working at a grocery store, something that's likely minimum wage, and you're not going to make enough to live. And then on the ODSP, it's likely not enough for you to live. So it's a very difficult situation.
And that translates into living accommodations, quality of life for many folks with special needs. And for me personally, I would like to learn what are some of those loopholes, what are some of those nuts that we can crack to make sure that they actually, in the case of my brother, has the type of life that I described that I want him to have, that I want him to lead, where he's taken care of. And also, I would like to figure out how that can be replicated for other folks. Because I think the financial burden, figuring out how will this person go on when they're caregivers or, their parents essentially, or whoever is the guardian that is responsible for them is no longer with us. How are they going to continue on to be living the kind of life we want them to live? I'm very interested in learning more about that and making sure it can happen for Neil. And then if it's possible to replicate it for other people.
Right. To your knowledge, what are your parents' hopes for Neil in how you will be a part of his life? What are their hopes? Like, I know that they could probably say it for themselves, but what's your interpretation of what they want?
Yeah, so that's a good word, interpretation, because I could have it wrong. It's something that we've just started to really start talking about, and I've said to my parents that I would love for them to sit and write it down, what they would want that ideal lifestyle to look like for Neil, so that I have a guideline to make sure that I'm following what they would have wanted, and to also know what Neil wants. Just so that I'm living up to that standard and I'm never, setting something up in a way where it's like they would have been disappointed or they wouldn't have wanted it to turn out that way. So that's a discussion that's going on. From earlier discussions, I mean, sometimes it can be a bit interesting because, for example, my dad at one point would have thought that when I was older, I would think that one day Neil would just automatically live with me. And I really think, going back to the independence point, I think it's really important for that not to be the case. I've told them that before. And
what was their reaction to that when you were telling them
my
that?
dad not happy. Disappointed. But I think that, like, again, as I say, over time, as we start to talk through this stuff a little bit more, and as he comes to understand the kind of life that I think would be good for Neil and that I can see him having. I'm talking about, him living in a house that is his own and, potentially even having, other roommates or rent or something like that come in through that scenario. I don't know 100%. That would be an ideal, but, or him living in his own condo where it's, similar to some of the communities where it's not a gated community, but it's meant for individuals who have access to health resources or other resources quickly if they need it.
It's like assisted living, but it's not like as intensive as that sounds.
Right. So there have been differing views on what that should look like from my parents' end. I do think my mom has a similar view to me. I think my parents are primarily concerned with they want people to be around. Like, they want someone to be there with Neil, which I will 100% be. I mean, I guess you can never say that, but I would like to be as well. I just
like
think
you'd be his caregiver for the purposes of like managing his life up until the point of where he doesn't know how to do that.
Right. But also just being that family, like being the person where it's like, hey, are you coming over for dinner tonight? Like, what are you up to? That is something that I will play more of a role on for sure but probably in the future, because right now, to be completely honest, he does have my parents. I, try to get home once a week on the weekend to have dinner with all of them. Like, so I will play more of an active role, once my parents are no longer here.
Like when the time comes for things to sort of change up.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we've all probably got the right intentions, the similar themes going on. We just really need to hone in and figure out what that looks like and have everybody say, perfect. If we could do this, we'd be doing a really great job. And I think that will be the ideal scenario. And also to get Neil's input. Like, he needs to let us know, like, what does he want to do? He has his own aspirations. That's part of my goal. I want him to live the life he wants to have. And if I can make it possible, I'll certainly try.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that it's beyond you, not to hold anybody to any sort of accountability for like, you must show up to do this, but he does have a great web of like your cousins. I mean, not everybody's that close with their extended family as you guys are. Like he does have a bunch of the dudes, like the buddies that he's with. And, it's not up to saying, your four guy cousins. And it's not up to anybody to be like, you can live with me. And I do agree. It's an important thing for him to have the independence part. But like, I feel he's always going to have like a very rich life in terms of his interactions and people who he's around and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are there things that in your adult life that still concern you about Neil or about, the situation or emotions or feelings you have as an adult, like how it's impacting you still to have somebody in your family who has special needs, or does it not really faze you anymore? Is it something that's just like, yeah, it is what it is? Or are there things that still impact you?
There are definitely things that fazed me more when I was younger that don't now. Could possibly be a factor of me not living 24/7 with Neil and mom and dad. But there are things that still faze me now. So definitely figuring out that what does the future long-term plan look like for Neil? That's a big thing, that we're getting better at focusing more time and energy on, which I feel good about. So it's less of a worry. It's more of a priority that we're starting to hone in on. And then the only other thing is, as I said, Neil has gotten way better. He still has the occasional, anger issue or what have you, which is just worrisome for anybody that's involved, including him.
Mm-hmm. It's a what if on many sides, right?
Like I just, if I could wave a magic wand and erase that one element, that would be 100% what I would do.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like I'm not, to be honest, I don't know, maybe I'm like young and naive. I'm not worried about money. I'm not worried about love and care and affection and family bonding and loyalty. Like that stuff is there. The roots are there. That's as I say, if I could wave a magic wand and there was one thing I could get rid of, it would just be to take away any of the anger that Neil struggles with for his sake and for everybody's sake. That would be it. Yeah,
because I think like you're saying, the love is there. And like often if we ever talk about this sort of section, or like, point about Neil, or if I speak with him, he's a lovely person. And when these things like, and you're not making him sound anything but lovely.
I hope I haven't misrepresented. No. He's hilarious and definitely very loving,
incredibly loving, to the point where more like, he's very honest about his love, where people might be very like, hesitant to be verbal about stuff. Like some people I find these days they have a hard time saying I love you or saying, exactly what they're feeling when it comes to feeling passionate about something. Yeah. That's not something that guy struggles with. Like Neil is very passionate and very loving. And like, that's why when him and I converse about any sort of anger problem or anger issue that comes up, it's like, it's not him. But it is him because it's the emotions that happen and who knows what's going on in the brain when, those lightning storms occur. But like, it feels crappy, I'm sure, to feel out of control. And, he is this lovely person who everybody who I know loves. Everybody, oh,
Neil's coming? Oh my God, he's hilarious.
Yeah, and I mean, it's he's a really lovely dude, and I think that you are lucky to have him and he's lucky to have you guys, and vice versa for every single one member of your family, because you guys have this very good way of like just loving each other. And like, I think that what I've learned too is that with every family there's issues and
nothing's perfect.
No. And I mean, even you can perceive things as like, wow, outside, standing at someone's window, this seems one way, but looking in and it's like it's so milquetoast, because it ends up being the same. At the end of the day, we are all really very similar.
Yeah. It's funny that you brought that up because you made me think of something that I thought about the other day. So it's when I'm getting off the phone. As I say, I call my parents every day. I call, my parents and Neil, they put me on speakerphone essentially. So I'm talking to all three people when I'm on my way to work. And something that I realized is, so I'll say bye to mom, I'll say bye to dad, and they say, okay, bye, love, have a good day. So they call me love. That's, a term that my mom uses. But Neil will say, okay, love you, sis, bye. And the interesting thing is no one else in my family says that. not because they don't love each other. I'm saying Neil has learned that somewhere, or Neil has chosen to say that.
Right.
No one, it's not a routine thing that people,
it's a true emotion just coming out, and you're not, you guys aren't like, oh, I love you so much,
like,
kind of thing.
Like, or love, like, give me a hug, like, love you. Nobody
it's
in
not
my family
verbally
says
like that, but there is love. But yeah, I see
there
what
is
you're
love,
saying.
but what I'm saying is some people in their family say at the end of the sentence, love you,
all the time. My family for sure.
Say bye.
Oh yeah.
My family doesn't,
right?
Which is fine because we're very clear on,
your feelings are clear
about each other. But Neil does
all the time.
It's just really. Now that you said that, it made me think he's letting you know. He's like, no, I love you. By the way, like, I love you. Mm-hmm. Have a good day. Bye. Mm-hmm. And that's a very sweet thing. And he's a big hugger. Oh my God. Like,
yeah.
It's a bear hug. Like, it's too strong.
Yeah. It can be very intense.
You're like, okay,
but
dude,
he's a bear
I
hug.
need to breathe. But but every time you see him, he gives you a big hug. And when you leave, he gives you a big hug. So he's a very loving person, and he makes it apparent.
Yeah, a very, very kind soul. So are there other positive things that you feel came out of your personal experience or your family's experience with having somebody as unique as Neil?
Yes. So one thing that instantly jumps to mind is my family's a little crazy. They are.
Okay.
Like, they're a bunch of oddballs. Because you kind of have to bring the crazy when you've got another crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that whatever I'm getting at has definitely contributed to my passion for understanding humans and trying to recreate that in the acting realm and the comedic sense. So, I mean, I have to attribute a huge amount of that to Neil and to my dad and to my mom and to my big brother, Colin. Neil's also my big brother. He's my biggest brother.
Big bro.
But so that's an automatic. I mean, loud, Larry personalities that have contributed to this, need to perform or, need to recreate and do that and show that to other people and make them laugh. That's a huge part of it. We already talked about the patience thing. And I think there's a drive in me that says it's not just about me. There are other people that will need me one day. And I might do that too much. I've been told by my parents, like, okay, calm down. Like, you're 20, you know what I mean? Like, go do your thing right now. Like, you're like, anyway, you're not a martyr.
Live for you. You don't have to live for everybody else.
So, but it is true that from my experience in the back of my head, I am always thinking, okay, who else is out there? Like, are they good? You know what I mean? What do they need? What do I need to do to make sure that I'm in a good position to get them what they need? That is a drive and an ambition that's probably pushed for, I don't know, maybe certain types of schooling, maybe certain types of jobs, maybe certain types of successes. So that has been another thing to credit to that. And then finally, if I had to give you one more, we talked about it already, but I don't do it a lot, but there's the odd time where I'll kind of take a step back and appreciate the innocence and just the childlike fun of being like, oh yeah, I came home on a Saturday to mom and dad's house, and this super old Sesame Street commercial from the 70s,
just
which is
playing in the background,
taped on some old VHS, is playing in the background. Neil is cackling, and I'm like, I know that damn program so well because I've heard it 3,000 times over my life.
Yeah, the repetition.
So, but it's still funny, and it just kind of, you're like, that's great that someone is listening to Kermit right now. You know what I mean? So that's the third thing too. Yeah, I think my biggest thing is I hope I've represented everybody in my family well, because I am talking about my family. And this is, take what I say.
Experience, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and take what I say with a grain of salt. It's through my eyes. It's my perspective. Sample size of 1. You know what I mean? But that's my experience. That's my interpretation. And I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
I'm sticking
Thank
to
you,
it.
Liz. I'm sticking to what I said.
No, I'm happy to have you on. I'm constantly inspired by every single separate person in your family on a weekly basis. Really.
That's a lot of inspiration.
That's a lot. I just bursting at the seams with inspiration.
For God's sake, put it in a book.
But yeah, I'm really thankful for you guys as a family and as people who I can like creep into your house and bug you. It's just fun times.
Oh, you're awesome. We love having you there.
So I don't know. I thank you so much for doing this. I'm really happy you were willing to speak about it because I think it's something maybe people don't really know or ask or whatever, and that's what this is about, right? And talking about real experiences. And
thank you for having me. I think it's an awesome concept what you're doing with the whole podcast. So
we'll have you on again. We'll talk a little bit more about art, and I know that just what we're getting up to too. I'll shout out to you guys when Grab It has a new video out or different things that we're doing, because you definitely should pop over to that YouTube channel. So do you want to represent that again and just let us know where we can find Grab It stuff?
Sure. So if you're interested in checking out Grab It Productions, it's www.grabitproductions.com. That's our website. You can also search for us on YouTube, Grab It Productions. I believe we're www.youtube.com/user/Grab It Productions. But you might want to, it's probably just easier to use the search bar. But that's
and
where
maybe just go to our website. And then we're on Twitter, but we're not really on Twitter, but it's at Grab It Pro.
Grab It _pro. Yeah. So Grab It.
Grab It _ pro.
PRO.
So yeah, that's it for this week, guys. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Grab it!
I want to thank Ava McDonald for coming on today and for being so open and such a willing guest. Ava, you're an awesome human and I cherish you dearly. Once again, you can find Grab It Productions through our site that Ava maintains and beautifies on the monthly at www.grabitproductions.com and on YouTube. We have new content that surfaces each month, so stay up to date because we're freaking hilarious. Obviously. You can find us on iTunes by searching Faking It Podcast, on our website at www.fakingitpodcast.com, where you will also find all of our episodes, bios, and show notes, and on Twitter at Faking It Podcast. Subscribe, share, and stay loyal. Until next time.